Everyone, Brandon and Kyle back here at the Kabuki Strength Lab, and today we are going to satisfy your wildest dreams and do a conventional deadlift video for you. Now, we're going to take this in a different direction than a lot of conventional deadlift videos, and we're going to break it down for you a bit. This isn't going to be to address every single fault with the conventional deadlift, but it is going to address probably the number one thing that we see individuals struggling with when it comes to position in their conventional deadlift. So before we get to the deadlift, let's take a step back and let's talk about what the muscles are actually doing as it relates to the hips in a hinging pattern. So we drew up three incredibly anatomical pelvises for you here. We have an anterior tilt, we have a neutral, and we have a posterior tilt. Now, one of the misconceptions about anterior tilts is hamstring tightness. A lot of people think to fix their anterior tilt that they need to stretch their hamstrings, and that couldn't be further from the truth. We talk anterior tilt a lot because that's one of the things that most people of average build proportions are going to struggle with. But in fact, in an anterior tilt, we have passively lengthened hamstrings. So lengthening them even further in passive stretching is not a good idea to fix that. Now, in all of our positions of our pelvis, we have a balancing act that's trying to happen between our hamstrings and our quads. And of course, there's musculature in the trunk that's doing a ton of that as well in our abdominal wall, obliques, and lumbar musculature. We're not going to go there today, but it is incredibly important. You can think about it like this. If I were to grab Kyle's arm, stand sideways, Kyle, and I were to pull tension on one side, he's going to fall pretty easily. What we need to have happen is balance tension from side to side in order for Kyle to hold strong. Pretend that someone's holding his other side. Obviously, what we want is something closer to a neutral position. So we're going to show you in the conventional deadlift now. Kyle, let's go up to the bar. There's a couple things that we're really going to be focusing on. We're mostly focusing on getting into position through hinging better. And there's two, maybe three things that people do incorrectly here. Number one, they just bend down to the bar. They'll bend down any way they can, grip the bar, kind of get psyched up, whatever, and then they'll try and find position. This is by and far the number one area that we see issues. Once you're down in this position and you grab the bar, it's for a lot of people a lot harder to find the correct position. Some people can get away with it, and this isn't a hard, fast rule to say you can't do this, but if you struggle with your hinge mechanics or you struggle with your spinal mechanics in the deadlift, you should not do this. Kyle, stand back up for me. What we want you to do is be intentional with your hinging mechanics. So don't even allow yourself to get into that compromised position ever. Stay in a good spinal position throughout the entire hinge pattern. Go ahead and hinge for me here, Kyle. There, easy, cool. Stand back up, Kyle. Now, another place that people are going to struggle with is in that anterior tilt in their hinging patterns. An anterior tilt means that individual is going to be immediately biased into spinal extension throughout their hinge. Now, that might not seem problematic at first, but as Kyle reaches end range, it's going to become very problematic. Cameraman, let's get a side view. Kyle's really bad at extending his spine. We were just joking about that. But imagine Kyle has this massive pelvic tilt here. As he continues to go further back and down, this pelvis position has to change into a rounded position in order for him to have more room in his hip capsule, because he's essentially getting blocked in that position if there's too much of a pelvic tilt. So even if you keep a neutral spine through extension, at end range, you are going to dip into into lumbar flexion at the very bottom of the deadlift. Now, the next thing that someone's going to do with that anterior tilt, they're usually going to press really, really hard through their heels to set up in the deadlift. It seems intuitive because you want to keep your body behind the bar, right, as many people say. But we find that people get so much of their body behind the bar, so much of their weight in their heels, that they end up with their hips really low, and they end up almost using their heels as a artificial way to stabilize their foundation of their hinge, which is going to be their feet. Now, what we need to have happen in a hinge pattern for the deadlift is for Kyle to generate adequate tension in his hamstrings. Again, this anterior tilt equals minimal tension in the hamstrings. Posterior tilt also equals minimal tension in the hamstrings. What we need is that neutral position. So we need to learn how to hinge our hips through a neutral pelvis and a neutral spine position. Kyle, let's go kettlebell here. This is our favorite drill for this by and far. It's one of the easiest drills to perform. We need to have Kyle's hamstrings get lit up. You want to stand up for me, Kyle? Just hold it. In this drill, you have to press through your entire foot. Do not press through your heels, and do not hold the kettlebell on your chest like you would a goblet squat. What I need Kyle to do is to think about, or intentionally push his hamstrings back without losing contact of this front foot. Oftentimes what I'll do with individuals who are unaware of this is I'll literally say, crush my hand. And it literally, they're not going to be able to put that much pressure into it. Kyle's doing a pretty good job here now. Oh God, Kyle, ouch. The drill is going to be a counterbalanced hinge. Go ahead and push that kettlebell out. First part, about a 35-pound kettlebell. Push it out about as far as you can without dying. Hinge through the hamstrings, pressing hamstrings back, and we're pressing through the front of the foot as hard as possible. This will destroy your hamstrings with a 25 to 40-pound kettlebell if you do it correctly. Now again, we're talking individuals who struggle with hinge mechanics, which is everyone who struggles with their conventional deadlift. We're going toes down, foot planted through the, or weight distributed through the middle and front of the foot, hamstrings pressed back, and hold position. We'd like to see you guys accumulate anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds at the bottom of this and do it for maybe 2 to 4 sets prior to your conventional deadlifting, and then obviously get back to the deadlift and try and do it a little bit better with more hamstring tension. Anything to add, Coach Kyle?
For us, remember, neutral is a range. We're not saying that you have to be perfectly balanced. This is probably on the farther end of the spectrum, and so is this. We don't have a perfect number for you guys, but if this is neutral position, we'll be okay with this and this. Obviously, anything to an extreme is just too much. And lastly, we didn't talk about it, we bring it up a lot, setting up a good brace, really important for maintaining that position. Obviously, we're talking about better ways to find it, but then once I found it, if I have good bracing mechanics, it's gonna help hold me there as I wedge into that bar and deadlift.
Brandon, Kyle out.